This is Motivation. I'm Lori Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Chrissy Van. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode. We're talking sidecars. You know, the good old sidecars, those cute, whimsical attachments to a motorcycle. And even though it changes the ride drastically, it also allows you to take another along the ride. Many people make the decision in life to add another passenger to their journey, one of which is whether or not to have a child. Today, we're talking kiddos, babies, children, those small humans that we know and love. Because having a child changes the ride drastically. And it should be one that we grow up knowing is very much a choice, whether we decide to choose to add that sidecar to our motorcycle. But that doesn't seem to be the case. It's this unspoken message that the sidecar is the point of having the motorcycle, rather than choose your adventure and what it looks like. Some people have always known they wanted kids, and some aren't able to have them. Some are struggling as they continue to try. Some have never wanted them at all. Some believed it was the only choice, later to find out, I do have a choice. And some got them by surprise. No matter where you land, there's mammoth amounts of expectations and societal pressures surrounding your path of a sidecar or solo. So on today's podcast, we're going to open up about our own journeys, address the pressures and expectations surrounding our proverbial sidecars, and round it out by sharing why no matter where you land, you are on the road you are supposed to be on, and it is going to be a beautiful ride. This is your motivation.
All right. This is going to be a hefty topic. And the reason why it feels that way for us is because of how much pressure surrounds it. Now, before we dive in, I first of all really want to acknowledge how sensitive this topic can be for some listeners. I think of personal friends that I have within my own circle that have struggled with infertility, suffered miscarriages, even have had some early medical interventions in their life due to health circumstances that have prevented them from having children, and knowing that from a young age. So I really want to acknowledge the sensitivity around that, because when they hear from someone like myself that is child-free by choice, I wholeheartedly understand why that can bring up some loaded emotions. But with that said, yes, I am going to be 35 very soon. And I have been married for 10 years with the same partner since I was a teenager. And we are a child-free couple by choice. So how did we get there? Well, I've talked a lot on this podcast how I've always been a journaler. Since I was a kid, I didn't have a journal, but I sure as hell kept a diary. I remember even when it went from paper to this little technological thing called Dear Diary that you would write in, and it was the freaking best. And if you had that toy, you totally know what I mean.
Or the little lock. Do you remember those little locks with the little key? As if that was going to keep your big brother and sister or little out of your little diary. But you felt safer.
I have broken into one of those in my day. I had an older sister. I had to know.
Yeah. So I'm just giving the visual as well.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why my sister and I didn't talk as teen years. A lot of trust issues, but that aside, siblings, am I right? But I kept a journal, and I actually remember having an entry in my journal where I looked at my life, and I probably would have been a tween at this point. So maybe around the age of 12. And I was like, I'm going to be married at 22, and then we're going to have our first kids, and that's the way it's going to be. There was never in my years of youth growing up in my head that I thought children was a choice. Got older into my 20s, and I knew. I was like, I don't feel this is for me. But what does society tell you? That'll change. That'll change. They're never okay with it being a choice. They will just tell you, you don't know yet. You're young. You have time. It'll change. Now I'm in my mid-30s, and I can say confidently, I am child-free by choice. There is a choice. However, society still works so hard to convince me that A, I'm wrong, or B, it really shouldn't be a choice, and this is a selfish decision that I have on my plate. And it's because we live in this very pronatal society. So as a whole, our society essentially has this expectation on us as biologically born women that that is our role and that is what we do. And if you don't live up to that standard, well, then there's something really fucking wrong with you. That's been my experience, at least with navigating this choice. And I think that more and more people are talking about it. But I would say 9 times out of 10, when people encounter my life and find out how long I've been with my partner, they think there's something medically going on. And that's the reason, because that could be the only possibility a woman that's in her mid 30s does not have children.
So before we started talking, I journaled. I just started journaling to get my, ironically enough, you just mentioned journaling, but to get my thoughts down and just kind of, spew it out and see what, really stood out for me. And verbatim, the things that you've just said is written on as my point form. Didn't really know I had a choice whether I was having children. The other portion was that from growing up, it was what you were told. You're a girl. That's going to be kind of your job. That's going to be the thing that brings you fulfillment. That's going to be the thing that brings you your happiness, is finding a partner. And at the time when we grew up, is very much like find your husband. There was no like partner involved. It couldn't be, a woman, non-binary. It was just your husband if you were a girl, right?
Yep.
That was your job to, make sure you snag a good one and have babies. And it was just one of those things that it was so part of the kind of doctrine that it just was like, you just didn't question it. And anything that pointed towards any females that I knew of, there was a stigma around them that there was either something wrong with them, not in that stereotype of like, well, if you can't have a baby physically, there's something wrong. But like, if they don't have a partner or if they don't have children and they're over 30, the whole spinster idea, or that it was kind of this idea that it was like a little bit selfish on their part. Because how dare they choose a life that didn't involve raising children? And same thing. It wasn't until I was in my, I'd say, early 20s when I was like, yeah, I don't really have that feeling of like, I want children, like looking and getting excited. And, where like a lot of other women around me were getting that feeling. There was a lot of women that weren't either, but a vast majority were, and even if they didn't necessarily feel it, they were so convinced of it that they told themselves that that's actually what they wanted. And like, I'm miserable, so I better get on that husband and baby train because that'll bring me joy and happiness. Well, I'm looking at a lot of my friends and they're like, fuck, that turns out not a thing.
Oh, have I been lied to?
Right. Yeah. And you're like, yeah, you have. And I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that having children doesn't bring immense amount of joy and love that you could never experience. You hear it all the time, and I fully believe it. But I also believe that we're not all meant to just have children. Your soul's not immediately meant to have children because you were born with genitalia that allows you to, or organs or whatever that is. And it wasn't, like I said, until 20s where I thought something's off. And it really felt confusing because I was told that this is what you do. And if you don't, there's kind of, it's that unspoken rule that something's not right with you. And in some cultures, it's a very spoken rule of like, no, something is wrong with you if you do not want this, or if you don't take this on as your responsibility, right? Getting married, having children. But it was extra confusing because I was obsessed with kids since I was a kid. And I have this like extreme passion for children and love them like no one else that I've ever quite met that isn't their own, that isn't their own children. Obviously, I don't love them more than their own parents, but like I'm right below that, it's like deep love for children. And so it really became confusing because I was kind of wrestling with this, like, well, why don't I? What's going on here? And then also going, and this also doesn't make sense because I dearly love children and love being around them. And they, bring so much joy to my life. But that's where, and we'll get into this as we go, but like for you, Chrissy, as you started to unwrap this, and for you, when you started going, wait a minute, what did that look like? The in between of like, I don't know, to I am child free and I am in a knowing place. What did that middle end work? What happened?
There has been no point that I've been ambivalent on the choice ever. I have kind of always, aside from when I was a kid and I was like, this is what I'm going to do. But I always knew that that wasn't the path that I wanted to go. And I was actually relatively vocal about that to a point. But then as soon as I got married, I feel like a lot of people would start to comment. Facebook at the time was all the rage. And so you have those 1 year anniversary reminders. And I remember when all my comments were like, the baby's going to be on the way. And I think that's where I started to feel a little bit of shame on myself for thinking exactly that. Like, is there something wrong because I don't want to? And then as time rolled on, I'm really open with my mom, and lucky she has never pressured for grandkids ever.
Oh, my mom had a grandma. She called it her grandma sofa in the basement. She bought high chairs and car seats. I don't even know if I was married yet. And I was just like, how am I breaking this to her? Because my brother doesn't have kids either.
Right. So luckily, like my mom did save all our baby clothes in case we wanted to use them for our own children, but she never put pressure. She was like, I appreciate her so much for her saying, follow your path. What makes you happy makes me happy. And we have such a close adult relationship that I think that's what we cherish. And because I don't have children, we're able to travel together all the time. And I have this really unique relationship with my mom. But on the other side, my in-laws, that has always been their dream. That is the destination that they were going to for their golden years of life.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that was my mom and dad to an extent.
So I definitely started to struggle later in my 20s and early 30s with a lot of guilt. And it's because I can recognize that my decision certainly has negative consequences for how they envisioned their life to go, because that choice is not their choice. It is out of their control. And so because of me, they've essentially had to mourn the loss of the life that they saw for themselves. Now, luckily, they have amazing nieces and nephews that have kids and, fulfill a little bit of that need and want through that capacity. But I started to struggle a little bit at that point, but not to the point that I would change my mind. Somehow I always knew I can't do it for someone else. That is a massive decision to fulfill someone else's life dream for. And second of all, like you can't go back. I much rather have a regret over not having them than regret having them. And don't get me wrong, if how we said in the beginning, sometimes they happen by surprise. You'd figure it out in life, but I have made a solid choice. And I think it's important to vocalize when they have come across that, because there is guilt and shame that I have navigated through much of my adult life, all because of making a decision over how I decide to live it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just kind of goes to show you of how there's so many outside perspectives that are seeping in and kind of turning the volume up over our intuition and instincts of whether or not that is the right choice for you in this life, because it really truly is that choice. And like you mentioned earlier, of people asking, like, when's the baby coming? And if you think about it, how commonplace, myself included, especially 10 years ago, of how commonplace it is and how it's the go-to thing to say, when are you getting married? When are you having a baby? And those are like really intimate questions. But even if we're that much open, which I think, we're all about being open and being transparent, but why is that the go-to? But we're so indoctrinated to that be the expectation that just seems like the most common place to connect with somebody is like, well, that's what we're all doing, right? We're all checking these boxes. You checking these boxes? Good. I'm working on those boxes. Good. Great. Everyone's in. Good. Glad,
Well, might I just add quickly to that is that even for my friends that are moms and they're amazing moms and living that fulfilling life that they dream for themselves, but even then they get asked the question, when's the sibling coming? Like, it's never enough. It's never fucking enough.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And, it's one of those, I remember even when I was kind of going back and forth, because I thought maybe my hesitation to want to have children, I thought it was maybe fear-based. And why I say that is because, so when it came to getting married, I was really hesitant for many, many years. I thought, maybe I don't think I want to be a married person. I knew I wanted to spend my life with Dave, my partner, but I was like, I don't know if marriage is for me, because I had so much, marriage meant divorce. There was so much divorce surrounding me as a child. Like they were one and the same. So I had to do a lot of work to separate the two. And once I did, I thought, and then there was no question. I was like, oh no, this actually turns out it does mean something to me. Great, moving forward. I've never looked back. It's been one of the best things I ever did. But with having children, I thought it was the same type of idea, which in many ways it was. But I thought, oh, I work with children, so closely with children and families, and I see the challenges and I see how much work, and how much sacrifice and how much things, and I see all of that. And so it was like, is that, and I'm so fulfilled with my job working with children. Is that what I want? So I thought once I separated the two, that I would have the same outcome. And when I did, it was quite jarring for me, because I had the same aha moment. It just went in the different direction than I thought. It went in the direction of, I'm not supposed to have children. It was this like absolute, and it kind of happened with an experiment. It was like my girlfriend, who was also my boss at the time at the Montessori school I worked at, we were deep in these conversations about it. And she said, well, what if you like spent an entire week where you like completely put your brain in the, headspace that you were going to be a mother, like you were committed, you're doing this like in the next year, this is what, and everything. And I was like, okay. And, I did it. And I was like, ooh, and I, would ebb and flow back. Oh, okay. Well, that would be nice. And like, and looked at the future and blah, blah, blah. And then the second week was to be like, I'm not having children. Look at my life, look at my, my partnership and all those different things. And oh my gosh, it was like a weight got lifted off my shoulders. And it was like this, like, oh, now you're living your life. And it was like, holy shit. And the other component to like, cause you're like, if you're listening, you don't really know, but you're like, what about your partner? Where does he come in on this? Is he like, do I get a say? And he does. And here's the thing. He didn't know for sure either. And then the more about, I think 4 years into our relationship, and this is the time where I was really going back and forth. He was like, I'm starting to think I would regret it if I don't have children. And I was like, okay, fair. And so I sat with that for a while. And when I came to this conclusion, and I had one of the scariest conversations ever, but the most honest, which I think is so important, as I said to him, I think I've come to the conclusion that I don't want children. And I know this means that I could lose you. And that's the scariest thing I could imagine. And it was like the most giant relief in the world, because he said, oh my God, I came to the same conclusion and I didn't know how to tell you, because he had got me moving towards that, thinking of wanting children. But like certain things and people were coming into our lives and just like saying things. And we were having all these separate experiences and then some together that was like leading us to these conclusions individually. And it was like, and so I remember the exact conversation and even where we were sitting and we looked at each other and we're like, so are we planning life without children from here on out? And we were like, yeah. And it was like, okay. And every year about we do a check-in because we, you never can ever say never. So we do this like check-in and it's never changed. And I think now officially it's been like 9 years, maybe 10 now that we've had that since we've had that conversation. And I've never felt more true to my life.
And that's where you get that absolute yes. Like that's where I got to the point of comfortably saying, I am child free. And 100% same. My husband and I check in all the time because it is a huge decision. And even good friends of ours parted ways. They had a beautiful marriage and so much love, but they both were on opposite sides of the fence in that regard eventually. And the loving thing to do at that point was to lead their lives in a different direction, which naturally was incredibly difficult for both of them to go through. But it was a decision made out of love. And I think that when it comes to talking about child free, there's just so many misconceptions that you come up against all the time. You hit one earlier. People assume you hate children. Not true. Yourself, especially Lori, I know you work with them immensely. I think one of the most exciting things I have is my adult life and my friends are being these incredible parents to their kids. I'm so excited to be auntie and watch them grow up and hopefully have some
Mhm.
influence and be that ear for these kids and help shape them their lives. And I think of figures in my own life that were that for me. My godparents, it was not by their choice, but they weren't able to have children. It was my godfather that walked me down the aisle for my wedding. Like, you definitely can have an impact if you choose to do so. But when you say you're child free, you come up against so much backlash from society. And I'm like, how is this happening? Because I feel like a lot of the people that are deciding to have children actually never ask themselves the question as to why.
Without a
Really,
doubt.
right? Like, whereas for me, it's like I've asked myself the question and I happen to discover about myself, my choice. It doesn't resonate for me, and that is okay. But even within the last year, I've had two male colleagues literally argue with me about my choice. Literally. I like, I honestly was almost lost for words in the situation, because me saying I'm child free is not bashing someone's decision to have children. I think it's amazing. The one in particular, I think that their child is the most adorable, vivacious little spirit that I love seeing the videos and seeing the photos and all the things. But you get the usual. And it almost feels like an attack. Who's going to look after you when you're older? And I'm like,
Oh,
well,
that one. Okay, well,
have you ever visited a senior's home? They're awfully lonely. Not a guarantee.
thank you for such a like a I can't talk selfish culture, which we are westernized, right? It's extremely like you're on your own almost, right? As you get into old age,
Yeah.
that it's like that kind of bullshit. And I'm like, hey, all that money that kids cost, I'll just put that away to savings and then put myself in a really dope senior citizen home
Right?
and
We're
party
having
the
golf carts
yeah,
and
and you
cans.
right. And like, yeah, right. We're all just gonna live together in our commune. Um, and that's a big thing. Like, and I don't get me wrong, there's moments where you feel as though there is that like, could I be lonely down the road? But then you're like, you can't guarantee anything. There's a
And also,
chance
there's
that you can be
billions of
lonely no matter
people.
what.
There are billions of people on the planet. That's my number one rebuttal to that, because that's the other one you get. Aren't you going to be lonely? And I'm like, there's billions of people on the world. If I'm lonely, that's probably a me
Yeah.
problem. No?
Also, have you now heard my personality? I'll make friends with a signpost.
Yeah.
That's not going anywhere. I'm making buddies. I mean, sometimes it's too many strangers that become my buddies. So I'm like, that's the other component where, and I think that if you invest in people, like you really invest in them along the way, people will show up for you throughout your life. And it shouldn't be a guarantee because I had kids. That means I'm not going to be lonely. You shouldn't be lonely because you invested in people throughout your life. And so people show up throughout your life, even the last days of it, sort of thing. And I think that's the thing that's changed as well too. It's not this kind of like, well, you just have your family, you just have your kind of little sparkle of friends here and there. Like so many of our girlfriends, good chunk have chosen not to have children, not just in our riding community, but friends of mine all over. And it's becoming so much more normalized because we're realizing that, hey, she's choosing, hey, she's choosing, and we're seeing that like, and they're, look at that. Holy shit. They're actually happy. Holy shit. They feel fulfilled. It exists. And making those choices that even down the line, we don't know what that'll look like because it wasn't really a thing before our generation where a good chunk of women were actively going throughout their lives. So we don't know what old age looks like with a group of women and men that are choosing not to have children. So no one can tell us what will be or not be. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think we get to live it by design. I think where we
Yeah.
struggle with this is because of how much pressure there is. It
Oh,
gives the
it's
illusion that
endless.
totally. And it gives this illusion that it's black or white decision in regards to what the outcomes are. When the
Yes.
reality is you're committing to a certain type of life at some point. Either you've committed to add that sidecar and you have a couple passengers going on, or you have not. But at the end of the day, whichever place you land, it's up to you how much value you add to that decision.
I'm so glad that you said the value aspect, because here's the one component that I've kind of communicated to try, not that I should have to help people understand, but it's just become part of it. And almost in a way that I'm like, hey, if I have this conversation, it's going to make it potentially easier on the girls that are going into women later down the road. So having the conversation doesn't, sometimes it's not so much for me because I could just be like, cause I don't wanna, but it's for, other people that might not feel as comfortable saying as such, or don't even know that they have a choice by it kind of trickling down. But one of the things that when people start spouting off all the reasons and why, or I've been called selfish. I've had a friend of mine, her dad was like, I think it's selfish what you're doing. And I was like, tell me more. And I was like, look, we're overpopulated as it is. And I was like, so we don't need more humans. And the other component was, I was like, there's two reasons, really and truly, there's two reasons that I would want to have children, and that I could genuinely find. One was to have the experience of like Dave and I and a little person that was a part of him and a part of me. And the other component was to feel that love that people speak about, that you feel for your children, that you could only experience, right, by having your own child. Now, those are the only two real reasons. And when it comes down to it, what goes into being a parent and what goes into raising a human, really guiding them in this life, not just like, well, I love them, you'll be a good parent then, like actually what it involves and what it takes, and the fear you have around that child of like, what if this happens? What if, like, everything it encompasses? I was like, those two reasons are not valuable enough. That doesn't mean you can't have things that you still are like, oh, this would be a beautiful part of having children. Oof, this would be really incredible. Things. And how much does that have to do with like you in a feel good moment, and then actually what it means to have a child?
Definitely. And I think what you're speaking to is what we have talked about on the podcast so many times about doing for other people. It's Brene Brown, I believe, the to be clear is kind, to be unclear is unkind. And it's kind of the same thing when it comes to your desire for children. And again, taking that pause and having clarity around the decision and getting really clear why or why not, if you have the ability to make that choice. Because again, when we started this, I understand not everyone has the ability to make this decision. And that's where it does get a little bit difficult and added backlash as well, because I can understand why a conversation like the one you and I are sharing right now with everyone would be upsetting to some individuals that really want this in their lives and life isn't able to provide it for them for whatever the reason may be. But being really clear and understanding that there is no right or wrong. There is no right or wrong. I should not have people fighting me on this when it's such a personal decision and there is no right or wrong. Literally, we have the ability in life to make tons of choices, tons of changes, that whatever aspect we live it out, whether we have the sidecar or not, you can make that future for yourself as you live it as appealing and as fulfilling as you want it to look like. The idea that to procreate or not essentially dictates your level of happiness is incorrect. It is incorrect. And I don't think as well that we should be putting this pressure on these little beings to be the solution for fulfillment and happiness. It should be a value add.
Yeah. Well, I cannot remember exactly who did the studies. There's kind of a few, but it's now, it sounds so fucked up to say it this way, but like children actually decrease the quality of your life. They do not increase. There's like,
I've seen a bunch of these studies,
100%.
actually.
But hear me out, because it's one of these like, it's not like it's like kids make your life shittier. It's not that. But again, where I go back to like, I think children are one of the biggest spiritual gift that can ever be given to you, because it challenges you in a way that no other experience could possibly challenge you. It brings out all of your stuff, the every layer of everything within you, and you have no choice to look at it because they trigger it within you, and they're your biggest teachers. But here, that's why the quality of life, because they force you to go to your edge, to go to the more extremes of like what it means to get rest, what it means to think of and put someone else before all your needs, what it means to still hold your or find yourself within all of that, the balance of it and the societal pressures. And it also is one of the most expansive things you can possibly do as a human being. It at least gives you that opportunity. And working with children, I can vouch for that. It's changed me in ways I never could have imagined. But as far as it goes of like, oh, it's kids are going to bring you happiness. If you're not happy now, have your babies, then you'll be happy. I would look into that. I would, I would ask around before you choose it for that. If if you are in a knowing state and you are in that, like, this is what I want, and, or it could be a surprise. It's not even necessarily a full choice. It just kind of happened, but then there's a certain level, how much of that was kind of meant to be. And then how much were you just making stupid choices and not protecting your ass though, too? Right. But here it is no matter what. But all I'm just saying is, like, again, it goes where, and this, I guess, aligns with what we also talk about in so many episodes that we record, is like, what is your why? Because if you are going down one of the biggest decisions of your entire life, because you will have them for the rest of your life, God willing, you better have a real clear why, not just, I have a vagina, some ovaries, so here I go, because this is what I do, because that guy told me to.
That was amazing.
I'm jingle.
It's going to take me a moment to recover from what just happened there.
Just to add it, because Chrissy, we don't have our video camera. We always kind of do this so we can get our full thoughts. We turned off our cameras. As I was singing that jingle, I had the like finger guns going.
But of course.
I was in full out. Yada he yada yada.
Is there any other way? But I don't think so.
I don't think so.
No, and it's interesting too. And I know we're going to talk about it on another podcast in the future, because I think this is an important conversation, especially the community that we cater ourselves to on this podcast. I just think there's so much not talking about the things happening. And that's why people like us end up so fucking confused when, yourself, that was ambivalent. I literally just learned how to say that correctly today. I was today years old when that happened.
I love it. What did you say? Say it again. How did you say it?
Ambivalent.
It's
creating my own inflections.
It was like a YouTube video or something I saw where the gal's like called a microwave. She called it a microwavy. I was like, forever, I'm calling it that. Just popping it in the microwavy.
The microwavy. But on the flip side of ourselves that are going down the child-free path, I have so many incredible friends, and I know that we both do, that are navigating parenthood, and they're experiencing this most beautiful, complicated, challenging journey. But they're saying the same thing, that even navigating that is so confusing, or navigating pregnancy is so confusing, because there really hasn't been this outward, honest information that's been put out there for people to go through those experiences. It's like everything kind of gets broad brush. Like for us, it was like, you're going to grow up and you're going to do this and have babies. And then you go against that and everyone's like, something's wrong with you. And then for the moms that have any sense of struggle, going through this massive life shift and identity shift.
Yeah.
Society goes, well, there's something wrong with you because you're not just glowing and strolling through this. And that's why conversations like this need to happen. It's okay to have choices. It's okay to struggle with those choices. It's okay to feel happy and fulfilled by those choices. And we have to stop letting society as a collective tell us we are wrong for making choices that feel right for us. Right for us, not necessarily right for everybody. It's not something to offend other people when we make a choice for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, I don't know if I've mentioned this on any of our other episodes, but I got Dave like a ID bracelet, and engraved on it is DIOW, doing it our way. It was what we used again when it was like, we're not doing this. We're really not having children. And we're like, yeah. And then it was like, once again, we referenced that of like, we do it our way. Like nobody can tell us what's the best for us because nobody is me or him or us together as a partnership. So it's an impossibility for anybody to tell us what is our right next step. It's impossible. And the only way to do that is to like check in individually and then come together collaboratively. And that's it. Like it's just, and it takes work. Like it's simple. It's not easy, like anything worth doing, but you have to acknowledge. And if you are just like, I don't know, I'm pretty sure that as women, we should have children. Like that's fine. But just like go down a little bit of a rabbit hole on like where that comes from. You start to be like, I've been duped a bit, just like changing our name. Nothing against anybody that's changed their name, but like that originated because you were the property of your father. And then when you were married, you became property of your husband. So like but we just did it and we never did ask anything. And now at least you can get information and you make a choice and you can create your own meaning behind things. It doesn't mean just because you do those things that you have to attach the meaning, but at least you know how to adjust and how to make choices and stuff, the more information you have. And so like, you got to question everything that you're doing in life and ask yourself, why am I doing this? Because if you're just doing it because that's what you do, i.e. it's dogma. It's a trap. Don't fall for it. It's like, don't grow up. Don't go grow up.
Right?
It's a trap. I always tell that to the kids. Don't you
True.
grow up. It's a trap.
Playing is the best. Even, I mean, I kid you not, Lori and I, not that long ago, maybe a week ago, were dancing like idiots, singing karaoke on a casual Saturday, like in pajamas at home, not at a bar, not at a club, just being silly little hooligans. And we need more of that.
100%. I just got a dope ass game of hide and go seek going on at the school this morning. And and it wasn't like, I'm going to entertain the kids. I was like, go, get down, screaming.
You're in it.
Oh, 100%. 100%. It was like, I always forget that, like, oh, I'm one of the teachers. One of the teachers here. Yeah. But there's a reason the kids are like, hey, Miss Lori, where were you yesterday? We missed you. What were you? And you're just like, I know you guys, you're my people. You're my peoples.
Right? I love that so much. But one thing I did want to add when you were saying the doing it your own way and why I love that so much is because I think we need to remember that we deserve peace and calm around our choices as well.
Yes.
There's always going to be a ton of noise trying to convince you that you're not doing it correctly. And I do think it's important to listen to all the sides to make an informed decision. And I'm not saying that decision may necessarily come easy for you. I know that a lot of people sit on the fence for a long time. I understand some people aren't able to make the decision because it has been made for them. But whatever your path is going to look like, and when you get concrete in that, you deserve the peace and calm around your choice. So just become one with it, live that truth. And it's going to honestly preserve your sanity because society, without a doubt, no matter which way you go, is going to come knocking with ways to tell you you're doing it wrong. But if you have that inner solitude, you're not going to allow that to muddy your mind.
So how do they get started? What would you suggest in our motivation maintenance?
Motivation maintenance.
You hear that snap through that? That was a clean snap.
Clean snap. I'm going to advise you first something not to do for your motivation maintenance.
Don't have sex without a condom.
Sometimes you just play roulette. The thing that you should not do is go to town with pros and cons lists. I think that doing it once in your life, sure. Re-editing it, sure. But I find with a decision as big as this, we tended to be like, let me list the pros and cons. And if you're just doing that over and over and over again, you're just going to drive yourself absolutely nuts. When you have leaned into a choice, you need to just throw yourself behind it and feel firm in that decision. But to get there, it's funny, Lori, what I was going to say is exactly what you did with the advice of your friend.
Oh
And it's
no. Then
living
this is
out.
both of our motivation main. So listen up, folks, because you're only getting one.
Amazing. But yes, living out, choose a time period. A week seems like a good selection where quite literally you live your whole mental thought process as if you've lived out one path and then the other path. And honestly, evaluate your feelings around it. Really, really try and dig deep with what's coming up for you, because more than likely the answers of which way to go, is it this way, is it that way, it's going to rise to the surface when you truly commit to living it out in your mind. It's almost like manifestation for like a sample size kind of thing, where you're like, I don't necessarily want to bring this into my life right now, but I'm going to just fully visualize what this like for me and pay attention to the emotions that come up and the obstacles that come up and the joys that come up. And you're probably going to have a lot more clarity coming out of that mental exercise. And Lori, you did it. So I don't know if you want to tag anything on there.
What popped into my head is that thing of like, and when you do that exercise, because here was a little bit of the difference, because I work so closely with kids and families, is that I had a more realistic version of what that would look like of parenthood, of like, do not do it the romanticized version of what it would entail to have children. Like, be realistic. You've planned a day at the park, you're getting excited, you're going, oh, poop up the back. All right, we got to shut that down. Oh no, now it's taken a half hour to get cleaned up and get out the door, and now we only have a half hour till nap time. Like, all the real things that like happen when you have children. A tantrum in the middle of the grocery store. And I'm not saying like you just envision just those things, because there's the other part too, where it's like, when they touch your face and they look at you, like the whole world is in your eyes, and the like love that you feel that you can't even put into words. This is the all encompassing of what it means to give your life to these little human beings that deserve the world. Right. And believe you me, part of me really wishes that I did want children, because it's such an incredible experience that I watch people have. So I'm not saying like, but also be realistic, not like, stomping on it, but like, don't just look at it as like, we go to the park and I'll push them on the swing and we'll giggle and I'll see my partner and they'll be smiling. And then we'll all just like, that's not realistic. You get these beautiful moments, but truly speaking, with children, it is your highest highs and your lowest lows. Believe me, I'm not knocking it. I love kids more than adults any day of the week for sure. But, you got to really, really, really want it for yourself.
100%. Big choice.
And you get that choice. It's a beautiful thing. And guess what? No one gets a vote on that, except for maybe your partner. But even then. Yeah. Oh, and I just want to clean up the one part. Yes, mother. My mother had a grandma couch. She had high chairs and car seats, and she was ready. That's all she spoke of. Couldn't wait to be a grandmother. And I was at the time looking like her real hope. And so, as terrifying as that conversation was to have, just for the record, she was insanely supportive. And she was like, I get it. I didn't know if I wanted to have kids. You guys kind of accidentally happened. And she was incredibly supportive, and it was so, so immensely helpful. Now, has she tried to convince me otherwise over the years? You betcha. But when I'm like, shut it down, Dardar, it's not happening. She's like, okay, well, I love your dogs. I love your dogs. I'm a puppy grandma. So like, she's leaned into that. So like, so also know that as scary as it is to have those conversations, they actually a lot of times go a lot smoother than you think. And like Chrissy said, you cannot make a life decision for yourself and these future humans based on somebody else's happiness that they're going to see every blue moon.
Totally.
Nada.
Totally. So do you have a quote for us today?
Yeah, it's super simple. This gal Kristen writes, too many people have hinted to me that life without children is a life unfulfilled. I completely disagree.
I love how to the freaking point.
Yeah, I just
Right?
disagree.
It's like your brain wants to
Completely.
say there's more, but
Nope, that's it. That's where it's
there need
like,
not be.
that's where she's just like, I completely disagree. And that's all I need to say on the subject. Like,
1,000%. Well, my quote speaks a little bit more broadly because, again, I can't really reiterate it enough. I understand so much that we have a choice in this. And I know that sometimes people imagine their lives or they've made a choice for themselves that life doesn't bring to fruition or whatever that looks like. So mine is from an article by Ruth Chang, and it says, "You can only know how you want your life to unfold and do everything you can to have it unfold that way. However, if your imagined life does not come true, that doesn't mean the story ends there, and now you have to suffer." And I think that one's just so important to keep in mind. Sometimes we envision our lives to look a certain way, and it doesn't play out like that. But it doesn't mean that you need to live in a state of suffering. You can make the choice to embrace your path fully and live fulfilled, beautiful, happy life. At any point, we can make the choice to honor our path, embrace it. And by doing so, it's going to be the right choice for you.
you've just listened to the Motivation Podcast with your host, Chrissy Van, and me, Laura Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motivation Podcast and visit our website at themotivation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.